All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to TFS Insider 2024. I'm Callie Schaefer,
And I'm Edgar Zaragoza.
and we are here today with our special guest, Nick. Nick, why don't you start off by introducing yourself, who you are, and what you do here at Iowa State?
Sure. So I am my name is Nick Joos. I am the Senior Associate Athletics Director and oversee communications and marketing and branding initiatives within the Department of Athletics.
Awesome. So could you talk a little bit about how you got to where you are now and kind of take us through your career journey thus far?
Well, it really began at Iowa State about 40 some years ago. So we did not quite have the facilities that we are sitting in today. But I was in the Greenlee School of Journalism. I worked in the athletic department as a student assistant in communications for 5 years. I was a 5-year person. We had baseball back then. I was the sport contact for baseball, did a lot with men's basketball then and Coach Orr and football, and really had a great experience here. A lot of people poured into me within the athletic department. Athletics was a much smaller operation than what it is today. But that prepared me. Then I went to the University of Nebraska first as an intern, and then I worked there for 12 years in a full-time capacity. From there, I went to the University of Massachusetts in Amherst for 3 years, where I led communications. Then I went to Baylor for 13 and a half years, and when I left Baylor, I was sport administrator for men's basketball, tennis, oversaw a lot of the external areas. Went to Mizzou for 4 years, and I've been here at Iowa State. This is my third year here, back home.
Wow, that's very impressive. That's a lot of
A lot of stops. We've had a lot of houses, but it's been a great experience.
That's awesome. So we want to kind of elaborate and talk about the process of designing Iowa State athletic uniforms and kind of what goes into that.
Sure. So Nike is our supplier, our uniform supplier, and so we work with them, our equipment managers, and our coaches in the design of those uniforms. And then obviously we try to stay, for the most part, within the traditional color palettes of cardinal and gold and white as our primary, obviously, as colors. But there are some exceptions. Football has introduced the black uniform. There's an anthracite that has been used in the past by both basketball programs. And then this past year, we had for the Jack Trice 100th year anniversary celebration, we had a replica uniform of what he wore back when he played here in the 1920s.
Yeah, and we will touch, I think, a little bit more on those commemoration jerseys later because those were something that we did want to talk about. When it comes to designing Iowa State athletic uniforms, how often are we redesigning uniforms? How frequently do we switch out new designs?
The process is about a 24-month process just because of how big Nike is and their ability to get things done. And so so we're just in the process of working through what our uniforms for next year will be. And so about every 2 years, we do a little bit of a refresh in the uniform space. And so they're working on that now. For football, we'll have a little bit different look this year because this was the year they were set up to be refreshed, and then basketball, and then it'll probably be another 2 years, and then we'll reset and do it again.
Okay, gotcha. We talked about, obviously, that you wanted to stick to the color scheme as much as possible, and we go through Nike. But are there any other requirements for ISU uniforms that must be met?
Obviously, Cyclones is important, Iowa State, the I-State mark, things like that, making sure that those elements at least are prevalent someplace, because one of the key things of athletics is branding for the institution. So making sure that everyone knows that it's Iowa State, that it's Cyclones, things like that are really important that help to brand the institution. And so consistency in that, the font, is pretty much the same, from uniform to uniform, things like that. And again, Nike's great to work with. They're certainly the world's top apparel company in the sporting world. And so they've been great partners to Iowa State and have allowed us some flexibility, like in doing the Trice uniforms and things like that. But we really try to stay within a pretty tight window, if you will.
Yeah. Obviously, working with Nike, when it comes to designing those jerseys and stuff, do they do all of the technical design on their end and material wise for functionality? Does Iowa State have any input on the construction of uniforms in that way, or is that?
No, that's great question. So we'll work with them. So they've got a website, and we will go in. Our equipment staff will kind of have a rough sketch of maybe what they want. They kind of upload that, and then Nike comes back with what we've submitted. and then we go from there and run it through the various through our coaches, administration, and go from there.
Awesome. And Nike is across all sports
That
and
is
athletics
correct.
at Iowa State. Okay, awesome. Talking about the Trice commemoration uniforms, obviously there was a lot of inspiration drawn from the original uniform. But what key elements were taken from that original uniform that we implemented into the commemoration jersey?
So obviously, the original uniform, the only pictures that we have to go on are black and white. And so this is the second time that Iowa State has done the Trice uniforms. The first time they were done in the early, 2010, 2011 there, it was the cardinal top with a gold stripe in the middle for the 5 bars. And that's how the 5-bar mark became part of the Iowa State athletics identity and the university's identity, is because of the 5 bars that the mark are the 5 bars from the jersey. And that was back in the 1920s. Many schools across the country, because cloth was difficult to come by at times and things like that, that's how a lot of uniforms looked very similar, had the 5 bars, or a look like that on the chest. And so the second time that we did this, stayed with the cardinal base of the jersey, went with the gray stripes rather than the gold in the 5 bars, and then the gold pants as well. And then the difference this time, though, was the helmet was white, and it then had Ames across it. And we did a lot of opportunities in the clothing with Ames on it, and so we've kind of introduced that as a very much of a secondary mark and a secondary look within the identity, because back when Jack played here, we were known as Ames, not Iowa State.
And obviously the goal was to commemorate Jack Trice with those uniforms, but was there a specific goal or intended message with this round or this jersey design?
No, not really. I think, again, it was more about him, his legacy, the 100th anniversary of the tragedy, and, just connecting that. And that's become, under Coach Campbell, the Trice story has really been told probably more than at any point in time in Iowa State's history. And so he's really made Jack Trice and that story an important part of his program and the culture within the football program. And so it was really the opportunity, working with campus this year, to really tell that story in the 100th anniversary of his passing.
That's something we did want to touch on just because it is such a big part of Iowa State history. Moving on a little bit, do you know a lot about the fashion show here at Iowa State at all?
I don't. I'm going to let you give me a little bit of a
Okay.
background.
So we have been doing the fashion show for a long time now. And so we are digital media team, so we are only a very, very small section of what goes into the fashion show. And our goal with you was to kind of branch out today because we want to make the fashion show a bigger thing on campus outside of the fashion department. And so that's why we brought you here, to kind of connect with athletics, to kind of branch out a little bit more. So we have some fun trivia questions about Iowa State and the fashion show, if you want to take a jab at some of them, just for a little segment we're going to do on the podcast.
Sure.
So first, do you know what the first ever Iowa State mascot was?
There's a story about that in the athletic department in the Hall of Fame area, and I've read that story many times. I know how we became known as the Cyclones, but I don't recall. So you're going to give me the answer here, right?
Great Dane.
Great Dane.
Yeah,
All right.
I learned that today too, so I thought that was pretty fun.
Okay, so now I'm going to give you one back. How did we become known as the Cyclones?
Oh.
I actually don't know.
Okay, so back in the late 1800s, we went to play a football game at Northwestern. Northwestern was undefeated at the time, and the headline the next day in the Chicago Tribune was "Cyclone Strikes Evanston," because that's where Northwestern was at, in Evanston, Illinois. And that's how we became known as the Cyclones moving forward.
Oh, very
I did
cool.
not know
I didn't
that.
know that.
So that dates to the late 1890s.
Awesome. Do you know what Iowa State's original colors then were versus the cardinal and the gold?
Blue and gray,
Black, gold, and silver.
black, gold, and silver.
Yep.
The Raiders. We were the Los Angeles Raiders before the Raiders.
Do you know what Matt Campbell's go-to color is?
Black.
There you go. And then this one, I'm assuming you probably won't know, but it's a fun little fact. What year did the first fashion show take place at Iowa State?
1932.
1982. So
82,
this
yeah.
is our 42nd year of doing the fashion
Congratulations.
show. Thank
All right.
you.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's been a process. I think its growth has really skyrocketed since Sarah took over. Who's Sarah Bennett George is like the head of everything now. But yeah, so it's very very exciting to see how far we've come. Do you know who we work with a guest designer every year? So
Okay.
we bring in a different brand every year to work with us. Do you have any guesses as to who we worked with last year for the fashion show?
I do not. Nike.
Not quite, but we worked with Steve Madden last year.
Okay.
So that was pretty cool. And we've worked with other brands like Urban Outfitters the year before. So it's always fun to kind of share the big brands that they fly in every year and they come and work with us. So that's
Okay.
always cool to share. With that being said, do you have any guesses as to what brand we might work with this year?
No.
Do you want to take a wild shot in the
Nike.
dark?
I'm gonna go Nike. I'm
Okay.
staying with
Nike would be interesting though.
Nike
would
would be, yeah.
And when is the fashion show?
April 20th.
Okay.
We've got a whole fashion week of events lining up to it, but our actual show will be on 4/20. So
Very cool.
mark your calendars.
All
Look
right.
forward to that. Back to talking about you a little bit. What are some of like your favorite memories at Iowa State working in the athletics department?
So I'd go back, all the way to back when I was a student here, and obviously the rise of Iowa State basketball. We were not very good before Coach Orr got here. We were pretty horrible, to be honest. One year they only won 3 games. But we got really good really quick, and he had some great players, Jeff Grayer, Barry Stevens, people like that. And so watching him take that program from the gutter, so to speak, to the Sweet 16 with Jeff Hornacek and Jeff Grayer, and beating. He had the chance. It would have been like in 1985. We played in the Metrodome in Minneapolis, and we played Michigan in the second round of the NCAA tournament. And Coach Orr had came from the University of Michigan. Very big game for him, and he was sick as a dog, but somehow was able. He coached his team, and beating Michigan was probably his greatest victory at Iowa State, and then went to the Sweet 16 out of that victory. So that was a very special time. For me and just watching that and the evolution, and I roomed with a lot of basketball players, and so becoming friends with them was certainly important.
Yeah.
I worked with baseball for a long time. We sadly don't have a program anymore, but sat out at Cap Tim Field on a lot of cold, wet spring days, doing the PA, the official score, playing the music. And to about 50 people. So that was very interesting. But just the experiences that I got, and the faculty pouring into me, and the people within the athletic department giving me opportunities as a student to really be almost like a full-time person, and pouring into me that, and getting me to meet other people at other universities during my time here as a student, gave me the opportunity then to go to Nebraska right out of school at Iowa State, and work there for 13 years and launch my career. And so that's why it's important for me to help Greenlee, to help you guys. Whenever I can give back in any way, I want to do that, because people poured into me and gave me the opportunities that set me up for a great career.
Awesome. And that makes it even more special almost that you're here with us today knowing that. So that's super cool.
Thank you.
Over the years at Iowa State, have there been any jersey or uniform designs that stand out as your favorite or super unique?
Yeah, I like the old. If you go back to the Coach Orr era, we had kind of a script Cyclones, and it's kind of popped back up here in the last year or two. I kind of like that. And then I really am a fan of the old school Cyclone, those old Cyclone marks. And I like Dribbling Cy.
Yep.
If you've ever seen that he's dribbling the basketball, the olds. I really like that mark. And I think, you've kind of seen some of those retro marks that have come back into play. Retro's really become cool, I think, here in the last 3 to 5 years, especially in the athletics world. And so we've got a heritage program of marks, if you will. And so you've seen a lot more of those marks, vintage, at retail, so that the fans can buy them. Because I think people who go to school in different eras identify with those marks, and they may want to have that blue tornado the whirly bird. They may want to have that, or they may want to have the dribbling sigh or the walking sigh or things like that. And so those are important marks within our history of Iowa State, and keeping those alive is important. And we've done a really good job of that. So I think that's something that will continue to grow. We've tried to look for, hey, can we find a secondary cyclone mark? We haven't had much luck yet in developing that. We're still kind of working on that concept, because we've got the I-State mark, which is our primary, and I think that will always, be the primary. But then how do we come up with a secondary cyclone? And we just haven't. We've got something out there that we use. It's used, but not much. And so how do we come up with that secondary mark that kind of fills that gap between vintage and what we currently have? And so that's something that's a little bit of a challenge. And we were hoping, quite honestly, to have Nike help us with that. But coming out of COVID, they eliminated all their staff in that area, so they're not really able to help us in that area. So we're just continuing to study that and work on that.
Yeah, I know in the last year or two, the surge of interest in the vintage logos have skyrocketed, and there's a new kind of opportunity that they presented to fashion design students this year. Who is it through? I can't remember off the top of my head. But it's logo designing for Iowa State. So it's taking the Iowa State trademarks. They don't have the trademarks for the vintage logos this year, which I know a lot of the designers were disappointed about. But it's an opportunity for design students to create something, and then they can submit it, and then if you are selected in the top, you get a trip out to New York City and attend Fashion Week and stuff like that. So I guess a question would be, when it comes to designing and doing the logos and the jerseys and stuff like that, would the athletics department ever consider leaning towards the AMD department for guidance or any ideas?
I think we always would be open to something like that. And if somebody has a really cool idea, we'd love to see it. Doesn't mean we can get Nike to do it or our coach. There's a lot of people that got to buy in.
A lot of stepping stones to get through.
To get through. But I think we're always open to that. I think that one thing in the last few years that has become, at certain schools, not every school. There's some schools that are very steeped in tradition and they don't get out of that lane. But then there's a lot of other schools that, hey, the kids are looking for cool and hip and things like that. And so you do see some different uniforms from time to time. Now there's a little bit of a danger with that. That makes the traditionalists a little bit grumpy. But at the same time, I think from a recruiting standpoint, a branding standpoint, and for the current student athletes that are on your teams, they really embrace that and like that. And so when I was at Nebraska, black has never been a part of their school color. But I was thinking about this the other week. We were probably one of the first schools that did an alternate uniform. We had a black basketball uniform that we rolled out one year when we played at Kansas, won the game, and then they got to keep wearing the uniform for a while. So sometimes how you play in that game with that special uniform determines if it gets to continue being played moving on. Coaches are very superstitious.
Yeah. Yeah, I think having some kind of outlet or connection could be cool with the AMD department, even if it was just, we do random, we have a tartan competition sometimes where they invite all students to kind of come in and play with fabric and little mini dress forms and stuff like that. So if there was maybe some kind of event we could coordinate with the athletics department where maybe people could submit designs or something, that would be cool.
That would be.
One day too, but...
Or if somebody can come up with a new walking sigh,
yeah,
that would be cool too.
Yeah, so and we could outreach to even graphic designers too. It would be a really cool thing that we should maybe look into, bring up to someone in the department.
Okay, I'll let you guys take the ball and run with that.
Yeah, that's all I have for questions for you. Edgar, do you have anything specific that we haven't already covered?
So I know technically, because I emphasize in creative and technical design, so I know a good amount about the design process, and I know that the final I guess uniform wasn't the original design. Would you say that, or I don't know if you can say this because I do know there's a little bit of discrepancies to this, but has there been a uniform that the final product was completely different from the original idea that you intended on doing?
Not really, because I think our equipment staff and our coaches, when we submit that design, it's pretty final, it's pretty baked on our end. Now sometimes Nike may come back and say, hey,
A little like
we
adjustments.
we can't do this stripe here. There used to be a mark on the football uniform that on the collar that was a V. Well, that became very expensive for Nike to do, and so that was in an alliteration of uniforms a couple of years ago. That's pretty much since disappeared. And so things like that, little things like that. When we looked at this year's football uniforms, they wanted a stripe on the side that they couldn't do. And so they're because they're manufacturing so many different uniforms across the country, there are some things that just to make that process be efficient, the uniforms are custom to Iowa State, but overall, there may be a cookie cutter piece of it that is not customized like the rest of it, and that's just something you have to live with, as you're moving forward. But they've been great partners to Iowa State, and have really done a good job of helping us to elevate our brand and to give us the flexibility. We just have to be again, it's like a 2-year process. That runway to get things in the system, to get them going, and to get them here, because a lot of their work is done overseas. So then to get it all back, it just takes time. It just takes time, and so and organization. But they've been great partners, and I think overall, I think our consistency within our colors and the color palette has been really good with the cardinal and the gold. And again, and introducing the black here in the last few years.
Yeah, awesome.
Good questions.
Anything you would like to add to share with the TFS audience and also just Iowa State in general?
I'd say I wish when I was here we had these great facilities that we're sitting in today, because where your studio is at's really, really cool. So I think you guys are blessed to have some great equipment. The Innovation Center is really cool.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's allowing you guys to have some great experiences that are going to prepare you for life beyond Iowa State.
No, definitely. The Student Innovation Center, there's the photo studio, everything back here in the corner, and even upstairs, because as fashion students, we have access to like the sewing. They've got a loom. They've got a ton of stuff I haven't even had time to all check out yet. So it is really cool getting to come down in here and have access to this as students.
This is unbelievable.
Yeah, we were pretty shocked when we first came in the podcast studio. So it's been really exciting and really cool to kind of branch out and experience these things and use this equipment. But
Very, very awesome. Well, thank you for having me on.
yeah, thank you for coming. We really appreciate
Absolutely.
it. Thanks for joining in on today's episode of TFS Insider. Again, I'm Callie.
I'm Anakin.
And our special guest,
Nick Joos.
signing out. I think we can cut it.